Africa. Numbers are important in our daily life as they help us count, measure, and understand the world. Yet, textbooks and history sometimes make it seem like people in Africa couldn't count. Is this really the case? In this episode, we will explore how Africans used math before colonization. We will see how math was a daily part of life in Africa south of the Sahara. As we know, numbers are the backbone of human civilization. They shape how we understand the world and the way we communicate mathematical ideas. African societies had their own unique number systems that fit their culture. For example, some cultures use the base 20 system, while others use the base 5 number system. In some places, they use the secondary base of either 10 or 20 to supplement the primary base. These number systems were not only used in trade and commerce, but also in religion, art, and science. Contrary to what people often believe, Africans before colonization had their own way of counting. They used different number systems, from basic words to complex systems that could count up to the millions. Many African cultures also used hand gestures to help count, in addition to their number words. As societies become more advanced, so too does the need for complex numerals. But where do these numerals come from? Sometimes they are borrowed from neighboring languages. Other times, they are created from within. It is interesting that many African cultures had similar words for 2, 3, and 4. The word for 2 often sounds like re or di. The word for 3 often has ta or sa, and 4 often starts with a nasal sound like ne. Just like in many parts of the world, counting based on 5 and 20 is prevalent across Africa. The Aztecs and Mayas of ancient Mexico also used such systems. Even the Japanese abacus, called the sorban, is based on both 5 and 10. The French number system shows this too. 80 means 4 20s. 90 follows the same pattern by adding 10 to 4 20s. The English word score, meaning 20, is a reminder that counting based on 20s was common. The Igbo people of Nigeria have a special way of counting based on 20. Whether 5 or 10 also play a role as a base is not entirely clear. They express numbers such as 30 as the combination of 20 and 10, 50 as 40 and 10, and so on for larger numbers. Most Igbo dialects form numbers within each decade by combining the digits 1 to 9 with the corresponding multiple of 10 word. There is also a special word for the square of 20, as one would expect in a vigesimal system. 400 is uno. The square of 400 or 160,000 is expressed as uno kuru uno. Literally, 400 meets 400. The Burundi people of Burundi count differently, sometimes using a base of 5 or sometimes using a base of 2. When counting large quantities of beads, which act as money, they always count in groups of 5. For example, 6 is itanon numwe, that is 5 and 1. 7 is itanon newere, that is 5 and 2. It's not just the numerals. The Rundi also use gestures to represent numbers. For instance, for number 5, they show 5 fingers while extending the lower joint. For number 6, they raise the ring, middle, and index fingers. Numbers weren't only used for counting. They were a part of everyday life in Africa, from keeping track of time to buying and selling goods. Timekeeping in Africa was often based on the lunar calendar. Months were named after significant events or weather patterns. The changing phases of the moon were important markers in many African cultures. Just like the months, the year was also divided by significant events, but on a larger scale. For instance, near the equator, there are 2 rainy and 2 dry seasons. Once these 4 major seasons were completed, the year was considered over. The length of the year in days may vary, but the regular events and seasons that make up the year remain the same. In urban areas of Africa, particularly in West Africa, the weekly calendar was often tied to the market economy. This could be a cycle of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or even 8 days. For example, the Yoruba, Igbo, and Bini of southern Nigeria had a 4-day week. These calendars were used to organize trade and commerce in the marketplaces. Many societies have a unique way of keeping track of time through age grades. For example, in some Igbo villages, they divided people into groups based on their birth year. Every 9 years, groups of men aged 35 to 45 were assigned leadership and decision-making roles for both the village and district. Numbers were important for managing money and transactions in Africa. Each society had its own way of using numbers for things like weighing goods, calculating taxes, and keeping track of quantities. The Ashanti of West Africa were famous for their way of weighing gold dust. They used brass weights in creative forms such as figurines and shapes to weigh valuable items. Traders either had their own set of around a dozen weights or knew a place to access one. Meanwhile, the royal treasury held a comprehensive collections of these weights. This method dates back to the 16th century at least. In the Songhai Empire, they used a standardized system of weights and measures. They had inspectors to keep the standards consistent across the territories and in markets. Tax time meant crunching numbers. In the powerful Songhai Empire, revenue filled the state's pockets. Each district had a tax collector and a minister in charge of the system. They collected taxes from both peasants and visiting traders. In East Africa's Buganda Kingdom, tax collection was a well-oiled machine. The country was divided into counties, each with its own governor. They collected taxes in the form of cowrie shells, hoes, and bark cloths, which were then passed on to the prime minister. In this system, a census of peasants was conducted, and each person was taxed at a set price. A portion of the taxes collected was then given back to the local chiefs for county administration. Commerce in the kingdom was tightly regulated by the king, and marketplaces belonged to local chiefs. Private individuals could still set up a market and take 10% of each merchant's earnings as a sales tax. Tribute was then paid to local chiefs and the king. In ancient Ghana, taxes were collected on all goods that entered or left the country. For example, the king took 1 gold dinar for every loaded donkey with salt that entered the land, and 2 dinars for every one that left. The king took 5 meat cows, about 20 grams of gold for a load of copper, and 10 meat cows, about 40 grams of gold for a load of other goods. We have seen how numbers played an important role in the daily life of pre-colonial African societies south of the Sahara. People used numbers to keep track of time, weigh goods, collect taxes, and conduct financial transactions. Each society had its own unique way of using numbers, from the Ashanti's method of evaluating gold dust using brass weight to the Buganda kingdom's well-organized tax system. We have only just scratched the surface. There is much more to learn and discover. Thanks for joining us on this episode.